Hey, welcome back, everyone. Right now, U.S. officials are warning that DNA collected from these ancestry type programs, right, 23andMe, these other ones, they're warning that the information from those can be used to create bioweapons. And there's some pretty serious warnings to Americans going around about this. I looked into it a bit more, and it goes much, much deeper than this, as you might expect. And so we're going to be going pretty deep into this topic today. These DNA kits, the COVID 19 test kits, and the weaponization of this type of information for biological warfare, bioweapons, and also, interestingly, ties to animals and especially farm animals. Um, I found some interesting stuff. I want to go pretty in depth on this today. It'll be a really good episode. Also, I interviewed Matt Gaetz while I was at Turning Point. Of course, Representative Matt Gaetz recently inserted Hunter Biden's laptop into official evidence, into official record, and I had a talk with him about Hunter Biden's laptop and kind of the significance this has for the country. It's going to be a great episode. That said, folks, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Rumble, remember after about 20-ish minutes, 2025, we will jump over exclusively to Epic TV. There's a lot we can only talk about on Epic TV. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to check out the new documentary we have. That's the real story of January 6th. All right, folks, I want to jump into the first story now. So basically, U.S. officials right now are warning that DNA collected from these ancestral type programs can be weaponized to be used as biological weapons. And let me show you first off Daily Mail, talking about kind of the current side of this right now. And they're saying you can take someone's DNA and design a weapon that can kill them. It's House Intelligence Committee member warning people not to share their health data with websites like 23andMe that can be used for a new bioweapon system to target them. And it's pretty bizarre. I mean, it sounds bizarre, but it's real. This is Representative Jason Crow warning that bioweapons are being made that use a target's DNA to only kill that one person. And he said this during an Aspen Security Forum on Friday. Now, I've personally heard of creating biological weapons to target DNA strains, for example, unique to specific races of people. We do know the Chinese Communist Party, for example, has doctrine on this, and they have been actively developing bioweapons like this. There have been many reports in the past. We also had Gordon Chang on previously. We'll be showing you some more stuff going as we go deeper into this. But something targeting one individual. This is the new type of assassination, basically, is the way they're framing this. Now, the congressman said the development of the weapons is worrisome given the popularity of DNA testing services like 23andMe. 23andMe said it does not sell customer private information, but the company is one of many that has provided information to police. And one concern with that is that different countries oftentimes will work with companies here in the U.S. For example, the Chinese Communist Party could, through its police department, request certain data on someone they say is a criminal. Many companies do cooperate with that. And also, a lot of these ancestry type programs, they do have kind of an opt-in, opt-out system where they will sell your data. They can sell your data to foreign companies, to other companies. And if those companies are tied to the Chinese Communist Party, well, there you go. Now, on this a bit more, 23andMe stated, in 2019, it was found that several Russian and Chinese labs were processing DNA tests for Americans through Medicare and Medicaid, which is also concerning because the focus is on these ancestral type programs. But if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, then your data is also being processed in Chinese laboratories. Remember also, we talked about previously, which is not being stated here, that a lot of these ancestral type programs also process the DNA in Chinese laboratories. Another thing. And also, what's not being noted here is something more significant, in my opinion, which I'll be going pretty in depth on today, is that these virus test kits, also, many of them come from Chinese labs, and many of them are also tied to the system as well. There's something interesting in this Daily Mail piece, which I'm going to hit on a bit later, though, and this is something I found very interesting. It states this: officials warned the bioweapons could also target animals and disrupt food supplies around the globe. So if you, for example, saw a sudden die-off of animals, or animals in a certain region started falling sick to maybe avian flu or like E. coli outbreaks, or things that look like these, they're suggesting that basically you could create targeted bioweapons to target cattle, to target, you know, chickens in certain countries, and use this as a way to disrupt the food supplies. Now, this is, of course, concerning given we have seen some very strange deaths within cattle, within chickens, and we've also seen weird virus outbreaks with them. One of the biggest ones being avian flu, which is why they're killing off a lot of the egg-laying hens in the U.S. I'm not saying for sure that this is bioweapons, but they are saying that this could be used for that. And I'm going to touch on that a bit later because I found some other interesting stuff with this. Now, folks, the interesting thing with this current report, there's a lot of news reports coming out on this right now, but this was actually known previously, and it was known significantly enough previously that even the Pentagon was warning about it. And before we go into that, folks, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. Inflation is at its highest level in 40 years. Interest rates are skyrocketing, and a recession now looms ahead of us. Caught between runaway inflation and a recession, our retirement accounts are in real danger. If you want to protect your future, you can call American Hartford Gold. They can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. All it takes to get started is a short phone call, and they'll have your physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or into your IRA. And they make it easy to do that. They have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Now, if you call them right now, they'll give you up to $2,500 of free silver in your first qualifying order. They also give you a free safe, so don't wait. Call them now. That's 877-260-2764. Again, 877-260-2764. Or you can text Joshua to 65532. And again, big thanks out to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring today's episode. Now, I mentioned that this was previously known. It goes back further than this, actually, when we're talking about these bioweapons, and in particular, how they could be using these ancestral type, DNA programs, where you take a mouth swab or, some of your saliva, and you send it to these companies. They process your DNA, and they tell you about your genealogy. They're very popular in the United States because a lot of people like me are, of mixed heritage, right? People want to know what their heritage is. Very popular in the U.S., but there were warnings actually saying these could be used for biological weapons or for biometric tracking. Now, it sounds far out, but I'm going to show you right now an actual announcement from the Pentagon. This is in 2019. This is military.com. And it says, Pentagon leaders tell troops to stop using mail-in genealogy DNA kits. So this is 2019, just a few years ago. It says U.S. troops are being advised to steer clear of popular genetic testing kits over what Pentagon leaders say is a growing concern that the personal information could be exploited or tracked. Now, they say this, top military brass received a memo last week warning them that some genetic testing companies are encouraging Defense Department personnel to buy genetic ancestry or health information products by offering military discounts. But they say the direct-to-consumer DNA tests are largely unregulated and potentially leave their personal data or genetic information at risk. Now, that, the memo adds, could create unintended security consequences that increase risk to the joint force and mission. Now, further in, it states this as well. It says the new memo does not specify how military readiness could be at risk if troops use off-the-shelf genetic testing kits, citing only, quote, increased concern in the scientific community that outside parties are exploiting the use of the genetic data for questionable purposes. And that includes, they say, quote, mass surveillance and the ability to track individuals without their authorization or awareness. Now, I'm going to go a bit deeper into this, but keep in mind that last point. There's two key issues with the collecting of DNA for biometrics or for using it for nefarious purposes. One of them is the creation, again, of bioweapons. We mentioned, for example, the current warnings that could even be used for direct assassination, that even killing one individual, for example, using a bioweapon. It can be used for race-based attacks, where a certain genetic strand common in a certain race, you could create a bioweapon to wipe out that particular race, for example. Or you can use it for surveillance. And remember, this report in 2019 from the Pentagon says that includes mass surveillance and the ability to track individuals without their authorization or awareness. Now, remember some of the freaky videos we watched previously, people with the World Economic Forum, for example, talking about how they need to get surveillance under your skin. There needs to be under your skin surveillance. That was the exact quote, under the skin, under the skin. And of course, what they're talking about with that is, in fact, biometric tracking. They are, in fact, working on this type of technology. I know there are a lot of people concerned that the vaccines can be used for that. In fact, Bill Gates even registered a patent for this, which I've discussed previously on this show, which would use a type of vaccination as a type of tracking, a type of, in your body, under your skin tracking system. People are, of course, concerned that the mRNA vaccines are being used for that, although we cannot say definitively that that is the case. All we can say is that they talked about it previously. Bill Gates has a patent on it. World Economic Forum is talking about it. Pentagon in 2019 was warning that DNA test kits can create a type of tracking system like that. Now, on that note, remember as well that a lot of these DNA testing kits, of course, are collecting your DNA, but it's not just those. It's also the COVID-19 testing kits that are collecting your DNA. And that was actually one of the big concerns in China, actually, when they were mandating, when the CCP first started mandating, again, mouth swabs or COVID tests. The Chinese people had pretty serious concerns that these were, in fact, being used to collect biometric data. That was one of the major concerns, for example, in Hong Kong, because soon after the CCP took over Hong Kong, ended its autonomy, the first thing they did was mass COVID testing, and people interpreted that as the CCP collecting their biometric data. Now, I'm going to go deeper into a lot of this, but I want to wrap up some of the stuff on what the Pentagon was saying in 2019. This is Yahoo News, also in 2019. It says this. Exclusive, Pentagon warns military members DNA kits pose, quote, personal and operational risks. I won't go over the whole thing, but it says this further in. It says, the memo provides little details on how genetic profiles could endanger security, other than noting that potential inaccuracies and health information could pose a risk to military personnel who are required to report medical issues. Most of the health reports provided by DNA companies typically pertain to medical risks, though, such a predisposition to cancer rather than diagnosing a condition. Now, this is something I found particularly interesting on kind of a side note a little bit, but something relevant here on how even this kind of information could be used, medical information, right? Because if you can collect the biometric data, you can identify a person. One of the big concerns, for example, is if, let's say a member of the U.S. military goes on a mission in a country, maybe they're part of like SEAL Team 6 or something like that, and a piece of body hair falls down. They lose a piece of body hair, or they get injured and some of their blood is left at the scene, right? Left at wherever they were. The adversary could collect that data. They could get that hair sample, which people are always losing hair. They could get that hair sample. Some people, I'm joking. They can get that data. They can take the blood sample. They can process that data, and then they can look, for example, if they have purchased DNA data, or if they even just want to log into some of these websites. A lot of these websites, these genealogy websites, will show actually closely matching family members. For anyone who's used, for example, Ancestry or other Ancestry-type programs, you'll know that if you log into these programs and you submit your DNA, you're also shown similarities with other people who've used the program, which helps people find long-lost relatives and so on. That can also be weaponized. Because let's say one of these SEAL Team 6 guys hypothetically loses body hair, or some of his hair on his head falls out, or he gets injured, and they capture that DNA, they can find matching relatives in the United States, and they can use that to triangulate who the individual is. And they can also create weapons after they triangulate it using, again, targeted bioweapons from that, as the Aspen Institute is now noting, to kill that person. That is one of the issues with it. The other side of it is they can use it for a type of medical, let's say, they can use it to harm people medically. This is something I've been told previously, and I'm telling you this cautiously because I have not personally confirmed this, because it's almost impossible to confirm. We do know that the Chinese Communist Party and other foreign adversaries have in fact breached a lot of the medical databases in the United States. The Anthem breach, for example, there have been breaches like this, where American medical data has in fact been exposed to foreign adversaries. One thing I've personally been told is that foreign adversaries were looking to use that to alter medical records. And the concern would be this. Let's say, for example, you have, let's say you're part of you're an American veteran, and you have a long-running health issue. For example, maybe you have, a cancerous issue that they're monitoring, or something like that. They can actually alter the medical records to show that maybe it's healed, maybe it moved. They can do it in ways where they monitor the wrong area, and basically that health issue continues. This is one other area that this can be weaponized. But further in on this, right? This actually wasn't just about American troops. Going back to 2019, when the Pentagon was warning about, there was something really interesting that started coming out around 2020. And remember, we had Dr. Gordon Cheng on around that time as well. And Gordon Cheng at that time was talking about how the Chinese Communist Party was creating biological weapons specifically to kill Americans. Now, Fox News had this in 2020. I want to show you a quick clip of this. And it said, China is collecting the world's DNA, and the reason is sinister. And that's Gordon Cheng talking about this. Let me show you the video of Gordon Cheng explaining what was happening. This is in 2020.
Same time that China's collecting the DNA of Americans and other foreigners, it is doing its best to prohibit the transfer of the DNA of Chinese to foreign researchers. And that means we've got to be extremely concerned, because that is not consistent with a country that wants to cooperate with the rest of the world. That is consistent with a country developing biological weapons that targets certain ethnic or racial groups. Well, China's efforts to collect DNA of the world's population have been determined. I mean, they're not only collecting Chinese people's DNA, but they're collecting DNA of everybody else. So, for instance, they've been buying up American companies that have DNA profiles. Also, they subsidize the DNA analysis. So if you go to an Ancestry company, chances are that it is actually a Chinese business that is looking at your DNA. And that, of course, can be shoveled on to the Chinese central government or Communist Party. Also, there's been hacking. We know that China hacked Anthem, which is America's second largest insurance company. That was discovered in January 2015. So there's so many different ways that China is collecting the DNA to make probably the world's biggest database of DNA of people on the planet.
Yeah. So we actually spoke with Gordon Cheng at the time as well, but let me go over a couple points with that. Now, that article also says that China's reason for wanting this information involved dominating the biotechnology industry, which is very important to them, Gordon says. And he says they included in their Made in China 2025 initiative, which is, for the Chinese Communist Party, Made in China 2025 was like literally their program to become the world leader or dominate the world, depending on how you want to say it. They after it became exposed, they actually removed a lot of the public stuff on it because it was seen as so nefarious. Now, but Gordon continues saying, this is a decade-long program to dominate certain industries when it comes to the biotechnology industry. And if you think about how COVID was used for that as well, and how COVID fed into that, you can put two and two together. Now, but further in it says this, The second reason is something much more sinister, and he says, quote, China is probably trying to develop diseases that target not just everybody, but target only certain ethnic or racial groups. Now, according to Gordon Cheng, genetic data gives China the ability to create bioweapons that can target certain groups of people. Furthermore, he said the country's behavior of collecting the DNA of foreigners while prohibiting Chinese DNA to foreign researchers supports this theory. Now, is China collecting DNA from Americans? Are they actually doing this? Well, yes, and this came out in 2021. Let me show you. This warning actually came out from U.S. intelligence officials in 2021, just last year. And let me show you the video of one of these U.S. intelligence officials saying that the Chinese government is collecting Americans' DNA. You get the idea. So that was 60 Minutes, and that was in 2019. They were warning about a company called BGI, and this was a Chinese company that was basically running a lot of the COVID test kits. Now, something interesting I'm going to get into, folks. Why is the American government buying Chinese COVID test kits? If we know that they're weaponizing them for this, if we know that they're being used by companies tied both to the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military, and if there's all these different issues that they're noting that these are being weaponized to basically kill Americans. It does raise some serious questions. We're going to jump over exclusively to Epic TV for the rest of this, because, folks, this isn't just ancestral kits. It's the COVID test kits. All right, before we jump over, let me show you a quick trailer. This is our interview with Gordon Cheng, where we were talking about how Americans' DNA was being weaponized by the Chinese Communist Party to build basically ethnic targeted bioweapons. Let me show you this. Well, let me continue for a minute. Briefly as well, folks, also on YouTube, if you're on Rumble, any other platforms, remember we have a new documentary out that's the real story of January 6th. I can't even show you this on YouTube without possibly getting a strike from YouTube, unfortunately. But please help get the word out on this. We're showing the real story. It's free to subscribers. We're giving you a free trial subscription. It's in the description below the video. Free trial subscription. Grab it, check it out. If you don't want to keep the subscription, fine, but just watch the documentary. Help us get the word out. Tell people about it. I think it's something really important because it shows evidence nobody has seen before. All right, that said, let me show you this trailer, then we'll jump over to Epic TV. This is Gordon Cheng talking about these ethnic-specific bioweapons.
This could end up leaving China as the world's only viable civilization.
What is the state of the Chinese Communist Party's biological warfare programs?
And one that concerns me the most is their program to develop pathogens to attack specific ethnic groups. And that's why I talk about a civilization killer, because all non-Chinese would be either sickened or killed by this. Remember, China has been collecting DNA profiles of foreigners. The largest collection of DNA profiles of Americans, for instance, is not in America, it's in China. We should be concerned about the DNA profile of every American because China can develop diseases that will hobble our society.
Yeah, folks, it's no joke. So I want to go more in depth on the COVID test side of this. Because remember, they're talking about right now, it's hitting the news right now, reports are all over the place, that basically these ancestral type programs can be used to create bioweapons. But what's not being mentioned in the current news reports is that the Chinese Communist Party was already collecting DNA data through the COVID test kits, and that the Biden administration actually was purchasing these test kits from China. They're giving money to these Chinese companies to make these test kits. Data is being processed in the Chinese labs, and they're getting your biometric data, your DNA data. The same data that they're saying right now, and they're blaming it on these, again, ancestral things, the same data that can be used for what they call targeted assassination or civilization killers. We're going to jump over to Epic TV for the rest of this, folks. Come join us, grab your free trial, and come see us there. See you over. All right, folks. Let's see here. So I want to go more into what was happening. What kind of I want to kind of walk you through how this was developing.